marketing. And of course, marketing is about, it's the market, and social sector has not got to do with the market. So in general, the social sector thinks branding is a top-down thing, and social sector is not about hierarchy. They think that branding is about making monetary gains, about profits. Social sector is not, of course, for not for profit. Or that is bad for coalitions, that it's like somebody trying to get disproportionate amount of power or authority. And again, that's something we don't like in general in the social sector. And it's about organizational vanity. It's about, I am better than you are. And, it's somewhere we feel that that's not such a great thing. So maybe these are some of the issues. But also for a second, let us look at saying, what is branding? And of course, branding, we all know, it's not just the logo, it's about advertising. It's not just advertising, it's actually about values. Maybe it's about strategy, it's about creating trust among your people and so on. So while that is, while that is all common to both the sectors, I find that there is a lot of difference between branding in the social sector and branding in the corporate sector. So I want to spend a minute just talking about what those differences are, a few minutes actually. So let's look at what the differences are between the social sector and the for-profit sector. So the starting point of the for-profit sector, the corporate sector, is it's all about competition, and it's about being better than the other one, winning the race. It's about market share, it's about growth, that sort of thing. Whereas the social sector is often about collaboration. It's about working together with large groups of people, right? It's about not just within the organization, but outside. It's about working with other NGOs, with the government, with the community, and so on. So there's so many other people. It's really all about collaboration. And even within an organization, it's often that everybody is much more equal than they typically are in a corporate sector. So that's different. And the moment you start saying this, that we are not about competing, but collaborating, and then you start saying, okay, in that case, what is the role of branding? So that's a fundamental change in the way we think of branding. A related point is that, corporate sector tends to be top down. It's a hierarchical structure, and therefore people at the top can decide what the brand is, a CEO or a marketing head or whatever. But thereafter, everybody else has just got to take it as it comes. Whereas in the social sector, like I said, there's so many players, and branding tends to be a lot more participative. Everybody has a point of view, everybody has a say in it, and therefore it becomes a lot more complex to think about branding. Yet another related point, branding in the corporate world is primarily for customers, whereas there are multiple stakeholders. In the social sector, there are donors, of course, there are other NGOs, there's the government, the community, and so on. So there are a lot of people who have to be, and it's the same message. The message has to come from different ways. And it has to go out in different you have to skin it differently for different stakeholders. And then the final point is, there are two other points. One is that, when in the corporate sector, you're looking for customer loyalty. And I will argue that actually what you need in the social sector is about cohesion, about getting all these different people to work together. Because if they don't work together, if they don't pull together, then you're not going to make a lot of difference in the big changes that you seek to make in society and so on. And the final point of difference is that in the corporate world, what you're selling often has immediate gratification. You're selling something that has clear short-term value. It could be a car, or it could be a shampoo, or it could be whatever, or a computer or a mobile phone. And it obviously has immediate value. On the other hand, what we are selling in the social sector is perhaps a view of the future, an imagined world where we think that we can reach. Or maybe we'll never reach, but that's the world that we want to work towards, a world of gender equality, a world of climate justice, a world of, a world without pollution, and so on and so forth. And that's a much harder sell, if you like, if you want to use the word sell at all. So therefore, if you get back to saying that branding, it was all of these things, how is social sector branding different? in the social sector, then we are just talking about what it is that we do rather than really getting into the why, into getting into our mission and so on. And then we tend to lose out. Many of you may have seen a TED talk by Simon Sinek, the famous, the famous talk where he talks about the power of why. But for those of you who haven't, I'm going to show you a clip from his TED talk, which really talks about the magic circle and talks about what the importance of why in all of this. So I hope this video plays neatly.
I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean, what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done. That's how most sales is done. And that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do. We say how we're different or how we better. And we expect some sort of behavior, purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. People don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products. And nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
So that's the big point here. People don't buy what you do, people buy why. If in the corporate world that is true, imagine how much more true it is in the social sector. Because we are here for a mission. We all want to work for that mission. That's what inspires people. And often we get so involved in the nitty-gritty of what we do. Often we are pushing some services or the cause that we work for, that we forget about saying the why and we focus on the what. And I'm going to come back to this in a second. But before I go away from this idea, I want to introduce a second idea. There are two social scientists working at Harvard, and they came up with this book called The Brand Idea. And the idea stands for integrity, democracy, and affinity. And they say these are the core points of what a brand in the non-profit world or the social sector should be all about. And one of the points that they make is that you got to look at the brand as an internal brand and an external brand and ensure that the two are in alignment. And what they argue is that if you can get a very clear-cut identity for your brand internally, then that identity results in a lot of cohesion across everybody who's working on it, your employees, your volunteers, the community, government, everybody else who works with you, your donors, and so on. And that cohesion in turn leads to extra capacity. And that capacity, in fact, then feeds back into your internal, into your identity. So what's happened is that if you get a sharp identity, it increases your capacity. And we will see that in a couple of cases that I'm going to talk about right after I introduce this model. On the other hand, there is the external brand we have to look at. And the external brand is the image of the organization outside. And if that image is consistent, then it creates trust. And then that trust then results in greater impact. And that impact, again, feeds back to the image. And the big thing that they talk about is that the successful social sector brands have an identity and an image that is aligned with each other. Therefore, that leads to alignment of cohesion, which leads to trust, and capacity, which leads to impact. And so you see that actually, if branding, if done well, actually leads to increase in capacity, increases you towards moving towards your mission. So having said that, let's go back to that golden circle that Simon Sinek spoke about, right? The what, how, and why. And while he's done it in circles, I actually like to make it like a hut. So if you see at the bottom of that hut, we're saying what? What is it that your organization does? And then maybe you have multiple pillars. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as you like actually, but hopefully not too many, which is how you're different from everybody else. What is it that is special about you that makes you what you are? But at the top, at the roof of the hut is the why. And so I'm going to do a couple of short case studies to make you understand how this gets filled up and how it works for organizations. So the first brand I want to talk about is a brand called Danutsav. And hopefully many of you know about this altogether. This is that festival of the joy of giving, which happens every year from October 2nd to October 8th. This is now an 11-year-old organization. It's an 11-year-old movement. It has literally got crores of people, lakhs of events happening, small and big, happening across the country. It has exceeded all expectations of the core team that started it 11 years ago. And what is interesting is that this organization doesn't exist. There is no organization. There's no formal organization. There's a group of there's some core members. They work with volunteers. Volunteers work with the community. NGOs jump in and sort of take part in the Danutsav. Corporates get involved as well. Media gets involved. Of late, the governments got involved. But there is no formal organization that runs the festival. There's nobody who owns that brand name called Danutsav, which is so typical of the social sector. There are thousands of individual events that make up the movement. As I said, there are NGOs, corporates, volunteers, community, government, and everybody needs to understand the essence of this movement. Only then will this, will this movement go forward, right? And this imagines a world. It's kind of selling you a world where everyone is a giver. Why it's doing that doesn't get into that, so that's the big thing. And I'm going to show you a film that they made last year, which I think encapsulates a lot of the values of Danutsav before I then reveal the hut that I think Danutsav works on.
छिपे से खिलौनों में भूली हुई यादें बंद पड़ी हैं ढेर सारी खुशियों की अलमारी तालों में है बेचारी खोलो दिलदार होके करो आज तैयारी बांटते हैं हम जो खुशी मिल जाती है वापस वही सौदा बड़ा है ये अजीब देखे न कोई हुआ गरीब दानोत्सव प्यार का उत्सव है ये जी दानोत्सव कल की पिटारियों से आशा का सामान दे राज सारे खुशियों के मिलते हैं खोने में देख ले आज तू भी खुशी कितनी देने में मौसम प्यार का उत्सव है ये जी मौसम दिल से तुम देखे देखो जी मौसम प्यार का उत्सव है ये जी मौसम दिल से तुम देखे देखो जी मौसम.
Right. So I love that song, by the way. And I think the point is that it's all about actually how you feel about giving, right? So if you look at that brand heart, the what is quite clear. It is an annual week-long festival of giving, which is celebrated all over India. And the key aspects of this, how the how part of it is, it's all fun. Every event is fun. You saw that there was so much happiness, so much laughter, so much goodwill that was reflected in almost every event that takes place. It is very participative, it's open, it's sort of very welcoming, it's very, very local. It's in your community, it's in your building, it's in your household, literally. And it's very diverse, because it's not as if there's one kind of thing that happens across the country or the world. It's everything is, it just opens everything up with the open arms. And the key thing, the why, is get everyone to experience the joy of giving. In fact, the people who started it, Venkat, whose original idea this was, actually says, we don't want one person to give 1 crore of rupees. We're happier if 1 crore people give 1 rupee each. And I think that's a wonderful statement. Those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of stories, the mythology, if you like, that build a brand. So that everybody who works on Dan Utsav knows this, that the focus is not on getting a lot of money. It's on getting a lot of people involved in giving. And then once the whole idea is that once you experience the joy of giving, you will continue to give. And which is really what we're trying to do here, which is to build a culture of philanthropy. That is the big change we want to bring about in society. And that's so typical of what social sector brands try to do. They want to create this big change in society. That's why we're all here, right? So that's the Dan Utsav case study, if you like. I want to move on to a second one, which is Teach for India. And I must admit that I don't have anything to do with Teach for India. I did have something to do with Dan Utsav, but nothing to do with Teach for India. But this is just me from the outside looking in at Teach for India and saying, what is this brand all about? And, this absolutely amazing brand that, has gone just huge. So when they started out, they did a campaign which I think encapsulated a lot of the spirit behind the brand. So they did ads like this, which said, you could settle for the designation, the neat paycheck, the long, long internship, the safety of the nerd, a boss, a schedule, your dad's profession, your mom's approval, a compromise of dreams, a known tomorrow, 100 known tomorrows for a name printed on a card. Or you could fight for that dream you've always had, for change, for a changed nation, for 100 kids you don't even know, for their freedom and your freedom, for the leaders that they could become and the leader you know you can be, for a name carved in history. Teach for India needs leaders and visionaries to build the nation and their career. This is seriously inspiring stuff. This is the why. This is the why that why Teach for India exists. This wasn't saying this is what we're going to do. This is telling you, do you want to participate in this movement? Come get involved. And this was another ad. There you follow, here you lead. There you have a hierarchy of bosses. Here, 100 voices calling you sir. There, lines you cannot cross. Here, minds to set free. There, a ladder to climb. Here, a door to hold open. There, a cubicle. Here, a nation. Teach for India needs leaders and visionaries to build their nation, build the nation and their career. So when you analyze this now, you get a brand that looks like this. We get bright young people to teach underprivileged children in low resource schools. So this is what they do. This is what they actually do. They get young people and they train them and they get them to teach in low income schools. But the three key pillars of the Teach for India brand are personal transformation, because what happens is they change the fellows who go in there. People may go in there saying, I'm going to do this for 2 years because it look good on my CV, and then I'm going to go to the US and do my MBA. But after 2 years, they're changed human beings. A lot of them, 2/3 of them, actually stay on in the social sector. So this is the transformation. Their families say that these people have changed so much since they went into Teach for India and so on. So this is Teach for India does a personal transformation of the people who go in there. Then it's about collective action. It's about working together, not just the individual teachers, but with the other teachers in the school, the principal, the parents. Everything that they do is with the collaboration of everybody else. It's not one hero who's going to come and save the world. And of course, it's a belief in that education equity. There is no good reason why children in low income schools should not get the same benefits that children in upper income schools do. And therefore, it is up to the fellows at Teach for India to be creative and to come up with ways of teaching which is involving and ensure that there's educational equity. And therefore, the big why that they work for. We believe one day all children will attain an excellent education. So if you have that identity, it gets people to come and join you, want to join you. That increases capacity, and that finally leads to impact. And when you have that identity, you don't need a big fat advertising campaign. What you have is a lot of brand ambassadors. Every fellow who's worked for you, everybody who's come in touch with you believes in this brand. And then they go out and that becomes the external image of this brand. And then when those are in cohesion, when those are in alignment, that's when you get strong brands. And that really is what it's all about. Of course, it does not mean that you can build a brand from nothing. And brands require investment. All branding requires some investment. But I would argue that that investment is really important. Of course, it comes from overheads. And we all know, many of you may have seen the TED talk by Dan Pallotta, but I want to just quote him. I don't have time to show you the whole talk itself, but I'd urge you to go and watch this if you haven't already. He makes a strong case for marketing in the social sector. And he says, everyone wants charities to spend as little as possible in overhead. That's backwards. Overhead is what drives growth. If charities can't grow, they can't solve problems. So overhead is a good thing, and I am overhead. And he ends by saying, our generation doesn't want its epitaph to read, we kept charity overhead low. We wanted to read that we changed the world. And I think these are stirring words. This is what branding can do. It can help you grow, it can help you increase impact, and it can help change the world. And that's really what we are all about. But sometimes in the social sector, maybe because we think we get involved in the minutiae of our work or whatever, we get so involved in the what that we forget about the why. And it's the why that is inspiring. It's the why, which is the reason why donors come to you. It's the reason why volunteers come to you. It's the reason why even the community wants to get aligned with you. So in summary then, what we're saying is the social sector is wary of branding, but there are many differences between the corporate and the social sectors. And that is why we need a new paradigm for branding in the social sector. That is what we teach at ISDM. I do a whole course on branding in the social sector and how it's different. Today's webinar was just a sort of a sampler of that in the half an hour that I had available. And basically, but the core of what we talk about is the fact that we need to focus more on the why rather than the what. And our belief is that that is really what makes the difference. So I'm going to end it here. Adil, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. And I'm going to be open to taking questions and so on.
Okay, thank you so much, Suman. And the ground rules for the questions, there's a Q&A tab participants will see on the carousel at the bottom. So please use that tab to send those questions out. I will queue them, put similar questions together and pose it to you, Suman. Does that work?
Yep.
Yeah. So people can start sending in their questions on the Q&A tab.
And while you're thinking of your questions, we must apologize because I think we hit the ceiling of 100 participants.
So that's strange, Suman, because the pack that we've taken is a 10,000 participant pack, but there is some problem, though we are also live on YouTube. So there are a lot of people watching us on YouTube as well.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say that those of you who've not been able to get in, we will send you a recording.
Definitely, most definitely.
Should I take one of these questions now, Adil?
Yes, sure, Sumant.
Yeah, so so let me take this one about the, what's the framework, best practice on branding for advocacy and thought leadership. And I think that, what we're saying is this is really about advocacy. We can, one of the things we talk about is that there is some kind of behavior that we probably want to change when we're in the social sector. And we find that, a lot of, so for example, let's think of the Earth Hour, right? And the Earth Hour is basically saying 1 hour in 1 year, we need to switch off all our lights. And the thing is that sounds like a pretty simple thing to do, and it's a very small thing to do. And you want to say, but does that create a brand? Does that make a difference? But what has happened is that over the 10 years that this Earth Hour has existed, it has grown from a bunch of teenagers in Sydney into a global movement, which I think I've forgotten exactly, but some 1,700 cities or something like that, where they celebrate the Earth Hour now. And that has given them clout to do advocacy because they are now being heard in the right places. They have made changes in policy in country after country. They've had success in saving forests and saving wildlife and so on and so forth. And I think that if you're going to do advocacy, you do better than to say, okay, this is my why. How do I translate it perhaps into some kind of a behavior change ritual? And then how do I roll it out? Yes, I'm going to take this question about, which I think a lot of people talk about. It's like, I have no funds. Yes, you do have funds. I mean, let's start with that, right? I mean, if you didn't have, so, you say they have no funds for branding, yet every NGO I know has created a website. Every NGO I know, for every program that they do, there is some collateral that is created. If nothing else, the CEO of the organization, the founder, the leader, whoever it is, has a following which may be in social media or whatever. If nothing else, he or she has a pulpit to talk to their own people, and their own people are brand ambassadors. So actually you have a lot of resources. I think you've got to come from that mindset of abundance, not from a mindset of scarcity. So if you come from that mindset, actually I have a lot, and then saying, how can I make each of this be about the why? And then it sort of starts to scale up fairly quickly. So I tend not to be very empathetic to the question of saying I don't have money at all. But I think that there is a lot of stuff that we can do. Somebody's asked, could you share some reading materials, books, resources to develop a thorough understanding? So that the brand idea that I showed in one of my slides, I think that's a good book. There are other books on branding in the social sector which exist and so on. But I think in general, we can read a lot more about branding. I tend to read about behavior change and so on, because that's so much of what we do in the social sector. What should I take next, Adil? There's so many questions, I can barely read it.
So the next question we have is from someone. So yeah, also it keeps shifting.
Okay, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this. Sorry, yes. I'm going to take this from Arnaz Khan, is it? How can we brand intangibles, leadership, communities? Also, when a movement is so complex with multiple verticals, how do we declutter while retailing the diversity? And I think that this is a really good point. And this is the hard part of branding strategy. I think first of all, the key point of strategy is, what do you leave out? I mean, if you got everything in it, there is no strategy. Strategy is the art of leaving things out and focusing on what is really core. And I think that that is the hard part. I agree, which is why, can you reduce, not reduce, but can you, simplify the complexity of everything that you do into that hut, right? That you make it in one sentence to say, this is what we do. Can you bring it down to 3 or 4 words of saying, this is how we are different? And therefore, in one sentence again, or a phrase, can you bring down the why do you do it? And if you can't say this, unfortunately, because you don't have a lot of resources, you're not going to make a lot of headway as your brand goes. I think that the complexity, the layers, etc., will come over time. You've got to give it that space. But I think that if we can get that brand going, I think that that's really where it will start from. Okay, shall we do some ISDM pimping over here, pushing? Because somebody said you mentioned that about your, Priya Shukla says you had mentioned about your course on branding and social sector. What's the duration? The course sounds interesting. I'm afraid this is a course that we do as part of the PGP program. The PGP is a 1-year program, the postgraduate program in development leadership. It's a 1-year program, fully residential, in full-time course in Noida. At the moment, we don't offer it as a standalone. So my course is part of that program. At the moment, we don't offer it as a standalone. We do some workshops for continuing education, but not that many at this point, and not one on branding as yet. Does work speak for itself and create a brand for itself, or paid branding should be an option for companies? Swith, Nisha Bose asked that question. I think the point is that yes, I think a little bit of paid branding is required. Every movement leads a little push. Thereafter, it can get viral, or it can. I mean, sorry, maybe viral is a really bad word to be using these days, but maybe it will then move by word of mouth. But you need to get it started. I don't think you can just say that my work will speak for itself. I think that work does speak, but then the work has to be simplified into a simple message that can go through word of mouth. And I think that's really what we were talking about. Yeah, there's a good question from Swamya Swaminathan, who says, thank you so much, etc. Although I agree that for us, we need to focus more on collaboration, there would be some competition with respect to grants, funding, etc. How do we stand out there in a collaborative sense while balancing the competitive aspect of this? So I agree with you. I think that is where the how comes in. So maybe when you are pitching for grants, maybe the why is less important. Maybe in that scenario, especially when you're going to foundations, and the how is more important. But I would again argue that when you're going for retail funding, the why becomes important again, because the more people who join your movement, the more likely you are to get funding, even from foundations and others, and CSR for that matter. CSR, for one, gets inspired by the why as well. And so I think that if we can get that why going, I mean, look for Teach for India. Teach for India was not the first to get into the education sector. Education sector is huge. There's so many people working on it, and but I think that Teach for India has managed to capture that pretty well. And there are others as well. Educate Girls, and you can look at that. And in class we do this thing. We write this hut for Teach for India. We write the same thing for Educate Girls, and you see that they're quite different from each other, even though they are both in the education sector, even though they both work in government schools or in low-income schools. They're actually quite different from each other. And you can keep going like this. Other organizations that work in the education sector, and they're all quite different from each other. Do you think that branding on social media is a better and more economical way than the old traditional way of branding? So first of all, I think that the focus today was not so much on the media aspects as on the messaging aspects of things. So we're saying that what is it that you're talking about? Are you going to talk about the what or the why or the how? As far as the messaging out is concerned, I think that we have to look beyond the binary of saying there is mass media and social media. I think that maybe the richest media is, is your people. Maybe that's the most important thing. Look inward, get all those people to become brand ambassadors, and if you get that going, then the rest will happen. Of course, social media is important, there's no question about it, but even social media requires some amount of paid. You need to boost your stuff, you need to create some ads, you need to seed things, otherwise it doesn't move. So it's wrong to think that it'll just be free. Okay. Is there some other question that catches your eye, Adil?
Yes, actually, there was one question about the consistency of effort involved.
Yeah.
It's by Himshik. How can we be consistent in making a brand name, and when again centralizing the benefit to some, that would again diverge from what the social sector is. It's a bit of a paradox in the the question, the person who's asking the question. So if you could answer that.
Sorry, just say that again. I couldn't find the question. Just say that again.
What she's trying to say, this is Himshika, and what she's trying to say is, how can we be consistent in making a brand name when we deal with a wicked problem and the context of organization is evolving? And she has a follow-up question to that, which says that again, the traditional sense branding does not gel with the idea of being in the social sector.
Right. Yeah, Himshika, excellent questions. I think that because we have wicked problems, that we need the simplicity of branding, I would argue. It's a lot of the work that I do in the sector is actually work with organizations and try and say that what exactly is this wicked problem that we're dealing with. And I'm sorry to come back to that other example I gave just now, which is to say, global climate change is a wicked problem. It's a huge problem. You don't know where to start. But I think that Earth Hour has done amazing work in that space. I think the idea of saying, how do I get this whole country to give? How do I get retail philanthropy in this country, which is not a religious philanthropy, but to the social sector? How do we do that? That's a wicked problem, huge problems to solve, right? But where do you start? I often talk about Gandhiji and how he started with a lot of stuff. I mean, think of the problems he was trying to deal with, right? I mean, here's a country that was completely divided, and how do we unite a country without mass media, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that in a lot of these cases, it is having that simple message, which is consistently being repeated by you and your core followers, if you like. Gandhiji's people were, do you know that Gandhiji never wore a Gandhi cap? You've never seen a picture of Gandhiji wearing a cap. So why is it called a Gandhi cap? And the reason it's called that is because the people who followed him, his core followers, wore the cap. And so the Gandhi cap were people who followed Gandhi, and they were the people who went and spread the message. And I think that requires a level of consistency. So people are not getting confused. You have got wicked problems. The job of the leader is really to, to simplify things, make it a soundbite, if you like, and make sure that it goes out. Branding, won't it lead to capitalization again, centralizing the benefits to some and that? But again, I think the point is that you can create large movements which welcome everybody and is not exclusive. And I think to that extent, we are open. So Dan Utsav welcomes everybody in. And so it's a movement. It's not trying to centralize it and say you can't use it. It's not trademarked. It's anyway just a yellow smiley. So anybody can use it. So I think it's just the way you think of your assets and way you think of your intellectual property, if you like, that is different about this kind of branding. Hemant Shah says, what's preventing organizations from building a stronger brand? And I think that, because they don't think of branding as being important, everybody thinks of programs and they think of fundraising, and they don't think of branding. They don't think of messaging. They don't think of communication. And I think that, that is a strategy by itself. It requires a third leg of the stool, if you like. And that leg has to be given thought. And I think that to me is the biggest reason why people don't do enough about making a stronger brand.
So Suman, we are taking some questions from our YouTube feed as well. So can I
Okay.
just ask the
Yeah,
question?
sure.
So there's a question for a company. How much is it important to talk about the organization name versus the organization cost? And second question, which is also related, is there any right age for an organization to focus on branding?
So
These
let me answer
questions.
the second question. There's no
Yes.
right. I mean, the earlier you start, the better, because that gives you more clarity. When you're a small team, you can all agree on what the brand is. As the team gets larger, actually, there is more, likely to be more confusion. Uh, I think the focus has to in my book, the focus has always got to be on the message, on the why, not on the organization name. It's like saying, just because you repeat the name of the organization many times does not make it a strong brand, right? You resonate with the message, not with just the name. And therefore, if I hear the message and if it resonates with me, I'll find out the name of the organization.
Great.
Okay. Any
So
other questions?
then there's the other question that if organizations are working in a collective with others, how important is it for all the organizations to be on the same page regarding what the brand would be?
Yes, we got back to the point about movement, right? I mean, I think the core of the social sector is it's difficult. Is the fact that you're not working in a vacuum. You're working with so many other people, and if you have to work together with them, and that is where the branding comes in. That's where the collaborative spirit, the slightly messy thing. It's not as if one person, some marketing head or somebody sitting somewhere, can decide on the brand and push it down. That is the kind of thinking that the corporate sector is all about. The social sector is iteratively working with everyone to create this idea of the brand, of the movement that they're all part of. And again, that is why I use the Dan Utsav example, because Dan Utsav is not some guy's vision of what it should be. It is the collective thing of a lot of people. Yeah, how can we, Ayushi Rivedi says, how can we incorporate all three aspects of sustainability, people, planet, and profit in a way of branding? I think that's great. And I think that maybe that's a question from the corporate sector, maybe more than the social sector, right? And I think everybody's trying to do that. At least two out of the three, if not all three, right? So you can see Unilever has been in the lead in doing a lot of this. So the way they talk about their brands, whether you look at a Dove, which talks about gender equality, or you look at Lifebuoy, which talks about health, Haath Muh Bum, and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that they do, which is focused on at least where people and profit overlap. What they do with the planet at the moment is a lot of stuff that is back end. It's not so much in the front. Maybe because in India they think that environmental appeals are not working. That will change in my view. But I think that that's really the way to go. You can see P&G as well getting into this whole thing of gender equality with Ariel and so on. So I think there are many brands that are getting into this sort of thing, and I think that's probably the way of the future.
Sure. Suman, there's one more question by this gentleman called Mrinal Kant. Often it is about investing in the overheads. Can you read it?
No, I can't. Sorry, I don't know where it is. Yeah.
Often, so the question is, sorry. Often it is about investing in the overheads to build a good brand, but sometimes it's also the lack of skills within the organizations, particularly relevant to our country, because of which organizations are not able to communicate their why, the manner in which they do so. So, how does one tackle this? Is his question.
No, I agree. I think that the big issue is the skills. Like I've said, maybe the resources, we tend to overestimate the resources, the money, the financial resources we need for branding, and we underestimate the human resources we need for branding. And while I'm not trying to minimize the fact that we do need money for branding, I'd like to say that we don't do enough effort on the thinking aspect of branding. And we need to strategize on that a lot better and make sure that we get the thinking right because if we get the thinking right, then everything else follows from there. So maybe that is first step. Maybe that's where we need better skills, and that's where ISDM is trying to make sure that our students get a better sense of branding and so on.
We have about 5 more minutes, so I think the last 2 questions we can take, Suman. So
Yeah.
one of the questions is by Mr. Deepak Bhatia, and these are questions related to the new proposed CSR Rule 4. And his question is, will the CSR Rule 4 amendment, is it going to dampen the effect of the brand that many NGOs have built over a period of time?
I'm sorry, but I don't know what the Amendment 4 is. I mean, just off the cuff of my head, I mean, I've been reading so much about it, but I don't know what sorry, if I can't answer that question. Yeah.
So the other question we can take is, social sector organizations working with governments tend to get political tags, and eventually the tag stays with them. How do we avoid the balance? I think a very important question in today's context.
Yeah. So balance is a hard word. And I think that it's almost like we shouldn't have balance. And this is a controversial thing. But look, let me talk about brands like Zomato, right? And it tries to be neutral. They want to serve food to everybody. They don't want to be. But then somebody writes a thing saying, a Muslim guy, is delivering my food. How dare you? Stop it. So what does Zomato do? Whatever it does, it's taking a stance. If it says, oh, sorry, we won't have Muslims carry food, then it's right wing. If it says, Muslims, I'm sorry, sir, which is what they did, which is to say that I'm sorry, this is not acceptable to us. And, it's fine if you don't want the food, but, we're not going to discriminate between various people. Then it becomes a liberal brand. Now, what I'm trying to say is that whether you like it or not, you are going to be put into one or the other camp in these kind of inflamed times. So I think it is best that you be clear about what your values are. And I think that, for corporate brands try to do this business of, I want to be balanced and I want to be neutral and all of that. And they find it hard. Social sector brands, we stand for values. This is one of the, in fact, I should have said that as one of the big things that is different about the social sector, that we are about universal values. And we've got to stand by our universal values. And so this business of neutrality doesn't enter into it. Gandhiji had his values and he was very strong about it. That's what made him great. All strong brands have values. That why is all about values. So I don't think that you can run away from that and say that, how can I be neutral? I would say it's not even a desirable objective.
Thank you so much, Suman, and thank you everyone for joining. And I think it was a very informative and engaging session. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you guys too had a lot of fun. We will be sending out a recording of the entire webinar to everyone who registered for the webinar. And do stay connected with us for many more such interesting masterclasses. Good night, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.